And so then, so we did a lot of that where it was empowerment and accountability and, righting your wrongs. And, there is a lot of similarities, which I think everybody should do, which is, getting off all your transgressions, making up for all your bad deeds.
Saying I'm sorry. Yep, exactly.
Yep. Confronting all that, we do identifying toxic people so you can see who in your environment is not good for you. Some of the stuff we do is pretty like hands-on. It's more experiential in the moment. Like we'll have clients right from the beginning contact all their family members, and we call it establishing trust. And we kind of get them to sort of fess up to their exact wrongdoings. And it's a hard thing to confront, but we found that when they do that, the family feels good. They're like, oh, thank God, I'm not crazy.
They don't think it's bullshit. They don't think that it's bullshit. That's probably nice to hear.
No, because you're telling them exactly what I did. Remember that $20 you thought I took? I told you I didn't. I made you think you were crazy. Yeah, I did that. They're like, oh man, I knew it. It's like, although there's some momentary upset, there's also some relief because of how addiction works, where it makes the people all around you feel like they're the crazy ones. It really helps the family start to heal by realizing, actually, it really was all you, but it also gives them the ability going forward to hold that person accountable. Like, now I know your patterns. Now I know what you're going to say. Now I know how you're going to do it. And then the trust really is reestablished and they can start rebuilding that.
Hello and welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today magazine, where first and foremost, we are a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself or loved one, or you're actively in recovery, maybe a little while or a long time, you're going to find all kinds of information and topics related to addiction, recovery, and really living a happy, successful, sober life at Recovery Today. My name is Rob Hanley. I'm the editor-in-chief of Recovery Today. And as always, without any exception, I always got really super cool guests. My guest today has dedicated her life to freeing those suffering from drug and alcohol addiction. She has over 25 years of experience working in the rehabilitation field. She has expertise with all aspects of the industry, including the clinical process, drug education, prevention, community outreach, as well as being behind the scenes in aspects of running an addiction treatment center. Her wealth of experience, coupled with her natural talent for connecting with people, as you will see here momentarily, and a deep desire to make a difference in the world, has made my guest today the leader that she is. My guest is the CEO of Elevate Addiction Services in Watsonville, California, as well as the co-host of the very cool podcast, The Elevate Experience, my friend, Angie Manson. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show. Forgive my dress attire. I just came from a workout, but here we are.
Yeah. We're not buying that. No, I know that you actually are. We are going to get into it. I know that you are one of these CrossFit people, which actually I was too. And then like all the people that are non-CrossFit people, they'll say like, oh yeah, you get injured, like your back. I messed up my shoulder several years ago, but I know that you're a hardcore CrossFitter and you look like you just finished a CrossFit. So.
Absolutely. It's definitely a way of lifestyle. And in fact, we have it as a form of, in our program, as part of our treatment, we have a CrossFit gym. And
okay, I'll put you on the spot. What was the WOD today? That's what it is. Workout of the day, WOD.
You got it. It was 100 burpee pull-ups.
Get out. That sounds so terrible.
Yeah, it's not fun. I mean, it is fun, but it's not fun. But it is what it is.
Well, it's working though, because you're nice and fit. So plus it releases all the endorphins and everything like that. Good stuff. All right. Yeah, so I do want to jump into a little bit of some of the stuff in your place. Having CrossFit actually in your place, because you are the CEO of Elevate, is very cool. And I was kind of asking a little bit, because we've been friends for a while, but like, what's so different about that? I wanted to talk about like what's so cool and different about your place. But before we do that, we've talked about everything under the sun personally and all kinds of different things, our experiences through the ongoing COVID sci-fi novel that we're in, and all of these kind of things. But the one thing I don't know is I really don't know your story very well. And I know from hearing about it, that is pretty powerful. So that was kind of my layup question is, tell everybody a little bit about, you're the CEO of a rehab, a very good one. So how did this come to be? And tell us the nitty gritty, hardcore addict story?
So my story rolls back to being a kid. My mom had me very young. And so I grew up as the latchkey generation where, we were expected to get ourselves to school, come home, feed ourselves, take care of ourselves. I grew up in low income housing because she was a single mom and had me very young. So I started getting myself into trouble at a pretty young age with all that free time and very little supervision. I started drinking and smoking at 11. By 12, I was smoking weed. And, by 13, 14, I was into much harder drugs. And all the while still going to school and keeping all that facade going. And so really by the time I was 16, I was pretty out of control. My mom put me in my first rehab, and that was not a time in my life where I was ready to get sober. I felt like I had everything under control. I was doing very well. I was still finding a way to make it to school for the most part. And somehow maintaining grades, sort of like, I had dropped out of school. She didn't even know it because I enrolled in continuation school and was still somehow getting my grades in there. So I was a very sneaky, but wanted to keep it going kind of drug addict. And so continued after I graduated, somehow graduated high school. Didn't even know if I was going to graduate high school. Luckily, I think it was due.
Me either.
Yeah.
I didn't know either.
We didn't know back then until I was like waiting in line to see if they were going to call my name and walk.
Yeah, because back then they actually flunked people though. There was a such thing as not passing or graduating. I don't think that really happens today, but back then, it was called it was always very uncertain to me whether I was going to go to the next grade or not.
Absolutely. We would sit by that mailbox waiting to see our grades, hopefully before our parents saw those grades, so we can, switch an F to a B or something like that, whatever we had to do. So, so didn't even know if I was going to graduate high school. Somehow did. I think the methamphetamine use that I was doing at the time helped with that. And but I continued to get in trouble past 18, not realizing now the trouble that you're getting into has much harsher consequences. Prior to that, I'd been arrested probably 7 times as a juvenile from, staying out late, stealing, running away, just being a bit of a heathen. And after becoming an adult, I had a few different things happen, met up with a few different groups, and somehow got a job at a car rental place. And due to the fact that I worked there, they let me borrow a car, and I came back to visit my friends in Santa Cruz, and I crashed the car and I got it into some pretty bad conditions. And then I kept the car too long and I didn't go back to work. So I lost my job and I crashed the car and I kind of forgot about it. And I continued sort of being bad. Now I'm living back in Santa Cruz after having been home in Reno. And I got stopped for doing something else I shouldn't have been doing. And they ran my name. And I found out that my former company had filed embezzlement charges on me. Due to the fact that I worked there, it was an upgraded sort of white collar crime. Now it's not grand larceny. It's this embezzlement.
That's and from crashing the car then, or what?
Yeah. And with it was like a $15,000, because it was a brand new car. It's $15,000 back then for a brand new car. But yeah, so I didn't even know that they had filed these charges on me, let alone that this was hanging out there in the universe. And so I had to go to court and sort of face the judge in Reno. And my public defender was saying, okay, so here's the deal. We're going to tell the judge you have a drug problem. This is why you got in your troubles. And I'm, being a good addict that I was, said, I don't have a drug problem. No, we're going to say you have a drug problem. I was like, oh, I get it. We're saying I have a drug problem. Okay, I can get on board with this. And unbeknownst to me at the time, the judge that I went in front of, he was the very first at that point in time in Reno to put in drug diversion as opposed to prison time. So very fortunately for me, I ended up in front of him, and he ordered me to a rehab for a year to begin with. And so my best friend had gone through a program in Santa Cruz, and I figured if it could help her, it could help me, because of course she was way worse than I was. So, I guess I could go do this and at least just do my year. And so I went to the program, and I having no money or resources, about a month into the program, started working there to sort of earn my keep. And I was the only client at the time. I think we got one or two, and I started working and sort of giving back, but I was also still getting in trouble because this was in my using town. So I was sort of weekend warring it while working in rehab, while seeing the judge, while working, and somehow made it through the first year and went back to the judge. And he said, look, you've done a decent job. You've done good. No more formal probation, but you're still you don't have to be in rehab anymore, but you still have 2 more years that you have to do, and come see me every 6 months and we'll see how your progress is. And so for me at that point, I thought, oh boy, well, first of all, where am I going to go and what am I going to do? And secondly, I don't like having this 10 years hanging over my head if I do one thing wrong. Like that's a big sentence. And I didn't trust myself, obviously, because I'd been chipping away and being bad that whole first year. So at that point, I said, okay, I'm just going to stay put. I'm going to keep helping people, and I'm going to get through this 3 years. But during that time, something clicked in my head. There started to be more time of me not using, more time of me giving back, more time of me working with people, more time where I was like, holy crap, for the first time in my life, I found a passion and purpose for helping others. Like, this is kind of amazing. And I loved it. And I started learning the ins and the outs of the job, every position within the organization, and really getting a lot out of it, and continuing to go see this judge every 6 months, until finally at the end of the 3 years, I showed up. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm like the second in command. I've learned every position. I'm helping others. I'm saving lives. I'm feeling good. I'm healthy. And the public defender, or no, the prosecuting attorney on the other side, wanted to recommend another 3 years because I had not paid my restitution. Back then, I mean, I know that minimum wage was a thing, but we didn't really abide by it. And I didn't really care as long as I had a roof over my head and some cigarettes in my pocket. I was like, whatever. I don't care. Pay the bills. I get it. You got to keep the lights on, do what you got to do. And so they wanted to recommend another 3 years because I hadn't made a dent in this $13,000 that I owed. And so my public defender looked at the judge and said, this is ridiculous. Is there something we can do here? And the judge, having seen me, progress from where I was to where I was, looked at the prosecuting attorney and said, I do not know what more you want from this girl. She's completely turned her life around. She's an executive of this rehab. You guys got your money from the insurance company. What more do you want? I so rarely get to see a success in this courtroom that not only am I going to take away that restitution, that's gone, that's done, but I'm giving you, and he was looking at me, basically a full pardon. I am erasing this from your record. It never happened. You don't have this felony. You don't have this crimes. You don't even have this past. Like, congratulations, young lady, you've earned this.
Wow. That's a lot of power those guys have. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And I'd never even heard of that happening for anybody or known anybody who had achieved something like that. So it kind of, it floored me. I was crying and I'm thanking him, and he's like, but you did the work. Why are you thanking me? You did this. I didn't do this. And obviously he put me on the path. So he very much helped me to be where I am.
So cool.
Yeah. So at that point, I had a decision to make. It's like, okay, you have nothing over your head. You have no restitution. The world is your oyster. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to keep doing what I love doing, and that's helping other people. And been there ever since. I ended up taking over the business and carrying the mission forward and expanded. And, here we are 20 something years later.
And it's in the same area. That's where I don't know where Watsonville is. Is it around Santa Cruz then too?
Yeah. We're all in the same area.
Okay.
Right here.
Where the same place that you started working all that time, you've still been there?
Whole time, the entire time.
Oh.
Yeah. And we've taken it through some pretty massive changes. We were a nonprofit under a parent company, and about 6 years ago, we broke away and decided we wanted to do our own thing and create our own curriculum and our own program. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years.
How long have you been the CEO?
Probably 15 years.
Is that right? Wow.
At least 15 years. Yeah.
That's a pretty tough mantle to carry, especially, I know about in the treatment center industry, there was a time back in the, I guess I'd probably say that, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, that very, very, very crazy profitable. And then all of a sudden in 2015, the insurance companies just turned the spigot off and places went broke. Like they wouldn't pay treatment for, even if people had kick-ass, great insurance, they wouldn't pay.
100%. The industry went through massive changes, and that was at the exact time that we broke away from the parent company and kind of went on our own. So not only are we making that transition, but then the industry, had all the corruption and the bad players. And so then the lawmakers started coming in.
Wasn't it mostly in Florida though? I don't know. I want to stick.
It was in Florida, also a lot in Southern California. I mean, they were all over. They just totally, took a good thing and ruined it. And so then we got all this pressure and control put in by the governments, by the insurance companies, by our own states. Like we started getting regulations from everywhere, which, we're fine with regulations. We're above water. But at the same time, like you said, with insurance companies now cutting how they're going to pay. And now you have to, employ all these different people and sign off all these things. Like we spend half our days now doing paperwork instead of just helping people, because you're required from so many entities to provide so many different things to show that you're doing all the right things.
So tell me a little bit about what's different. I know that are you a 12-step or are you a non-12-step, or are you kind of combination? I mean, you've been in the field for so long. I assume that you either developed this or you brought some Michael Jordan clinical director person in that's badass, or like, what was the vision for this place?
Myself and my executive team developed the whole program ourselves. We have a copyrighted curriculum. It is not AA or NA based. It is based off of like accountability, responsibility, empowerment. Some of my struggles with the AA modality was, admit you're powerless. And me being a stubborn person, I could never admit that. And so I almost prevented myself from getting help because I refused to just get on board with that one premise. And so then, so we did a lot of that where it was empowerment and accountability and, righting your wrongs. And, there is a lot of similarities, which I think everybody should do, which is, getting off all your transgressions, making up for all your bad deeds.
Saying I'm sorry. Yep, exactly.
Yep. Confronting all that, we do identifying toxic people so you can see who in your environment is not good for you. Some of the stuff we do is pretty like hands-on. It's more experiential in the moment. Like we'll have clients right from the beginning contact all their family members, and we call it establishing trust. And we kind of get them to sort of fess up to their exact wrongdoings. And it's a hard thing to confront, but we found that when they do that, the family feels good. They're like, oh, thank God, I'm not crazy.
They don't think it's bullshit. They don't think that it's bullshit. That's probably nice to hear.
No, because you're telling them exactly what I did. Remember that $20 you thought I took? I told you I didn't. I made you think you were crazy. Yeah, I did that. They're like, oh man, I knew it. It's like, although there's some momentary upset, there's also some relief because of how addiction works, where it makes the people all around you feel like they're the crazy ones. It really helps the family start to heal by realizing, actually, it really was all you, but it also gives them the ability going forward to hold that person accountable. Like, now I know your patterns. Now I know what you're going to say. Now I know how you're going to do it. And then the trust really is reestablished and they can start rebuilding that.
The thing that I find is what for me, one of the most egregious things is to lie. And not to throw him under the bus because he's doing wonderful, but my 19-year-old son used to just lie to me all the time. He lied about stuff that didn't matter. Like, hey, do you have a sandwich? It was like, when I catch him in it, it was like, why'd you lie about that? Like, I don't even care. If you're gonna lie about something that's, that's meaningful. But I used to wonder like what it was. And this is again, I was talking in the pre-interview about what I like about recovery, and you're here and you're like, oh man, I just got done working out and I should be changing. And it's like, recovery is very authentic and it's very true. It's the cornerstone is truth. And I remember one time telling my son, I go, there's some things that really, a lie for me is the worst that can happen, because when you lie to me, number one, you're also telling me that I'm stupid and that I don't like to be cheated, don't fucking think that you're going to slip one past me. It's very disrespectful, and there's all of these other parts to it. But one of the pieces that I thought about, particularly in family kind of dynamics, is, when you lie, the other person never really knows. It's like having a compass, and they never really know, like, where am I exactly? Like, is this north? Is it south? Like, how far is this? Like, he said he's doing really good, but he's, is he? I don't really, you had this, this feeling. So yeah, I can see, like, even saying, like, yeah, that 20, I knew that shit. I just knew that. So at least, I guess, when you come clean, yeah, then you have, like, okay, like, all right, like, if you say we're here and that's north, then I'm going to believe it, so cool.
Yeah.
That's a cool part. I love it.
It's important because, then they can't go back and try those same things, because family's like, now I know better. And I recognize this pattern, they see it. Yeah.
Cool. So what else did you put together in your program? Actually, let's jump. I mentioned CrossFit. How did that? So you actually have CrossFit in your program. That's like a brand. That's not like we do CrossFit like stuff. You actually are a CrossFit at your place.
Yeah, we actually have a CrossFit gym in the facility. So I actually got sober without exercise a long time ago. That was the modality back then. We just smoked cigarettes and drank coffee, and that's how you got sober. You kind of white knuckled it, more or less.
Yeah.
But then, as times have progressed, I myself got into fitness and health. I started CrossFitting. And when I was CrossFitting, I started realizing a lot of the parallels of, wow, I bet this would translate really good into recovery, because, a big component of getting sober is you don't feel good mentally, so you don't feel good physically, and you don't want to get fat, and there's self-esteem, and there's just all these emotions and issues, and all that goes along with it. Well, with CrossFit, you sort of jumpstart all those endorphins and dopamine, and everything starts going, and then you're all of a sudden sleeping better right out of the gate. So then you're starting to think better and you're feeling better. And so much of, like, how we feel is based on, how our body feels. And so we're trying to educate people to learn how to feel good without the need of drinking, using, doing something else, taking something. Like, how do you generate that feeling naturally? And so that was a big component of CrossFit. Another thing that I absolutely loved was, when you're in that gym, you've got weights dropping over here, the coach over here, the clock up here, this is happening there. You have to be so 100% present in the moment that you literally can't be thinking about your past, your future. I got to do this. I need to do that. You're right here, right now. And when I was in the CrossFit class, I would walk away, and because at this point I was an executive, I feel so good physically, but mentally too, because I was so detached for that hour of being so in the moment, that it created that sort of peaceful, easy feeling. And I thought that's, a big part of what's wrong with addicts, is we get stuck in that past, replaying those tapes, replaying those bad things. And so this will, like, cement them right here in the present. And, since mindfulness is a cornerstone of our program as well, this helps you be mindful in the moment, sort of shocks you right into that. So you automatically get that feeling of how it feels to be in the present and not stuck in that past.
When I think of mindfulness, I'm usually thinking of, like, yoga, though. And it's, very serene and quiet, and trying not to think about anything.
Yeah,
so
there is that. I mean, we do have yoga as an alternative to those that can't CrossFit. And some people, it just requires getting there in different ways. For me, that quiet sitting, it doesn't work for me. I need, like, action and moment where I'm like, oh, yes, I'm here, and I feel good about that.
Right on. Now, how long normally is it? How long is your program? Is it?
Yeah, so our program is, we do have a Detox Plus 30 Day. That's our shorter program in South Lake Tahoe. I used to be very opposed to a shorter program. Like, our program used to be like 6 months long.
Yeah.
But it's pretty expensive to keep people around for 6 months. And so through time, I've had to be, like, a smarter business person and realize, like, not everybody has 6 months to give either. And so we have our full-length program, which is our best one, our best product, and that's running about 60 days. And then we have Tahoe, which is our 30-day program, which is a minier version.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then what do they do afterwards? I mean, what's the transition back? Because you're not a 12-step. A lot of times it's to get into a meeting or get a sponsor or something like that. What are you guys doing after they leave?
So we start doing smart recovery during the time that they're in their program. There's smart recovery meetings in almost every single town. It's very similar to AA. There's also a lot of spiritual, like Buddhist recovery programs, a lot of them here in Santa Cruz, but we have resources to those in their community. Obviously, CrossFit is a really healthy community, which is why we wanted to get them doing that as well, so that they would have that to go back out to. And then we have our continuing care. So we have our alumni group that does a Zoom meeting once a week. We have outpatient where we continue to work with people after they go home. We did that huge transition last year with COVID where we moved that all virtual so that, you know, wherever you go, you can actually still keep doing a program from the Zoom. So we have a lot of different ways to stay keeping and improving on
You know,
yourself.
the weird thing is, one of the things about COVID that, I mean, it's such a basic major change is I personally think nothing takes the place of being physically in the same place with somebody, but it has become so commonplace. Like before it would be like, what, like you're going to Zoom, like it's going to be rinky dinky, or it's not really real. It's such a low, but now it's so commonplace. Nobody bats an eye about a Zoom at all. And I actually think in some ways, well, it's made it much more convenient to connect. But so that's that's pretty cool. I mean, nobody bats an eye about, yeah, we have Zooms and you can share and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. And then you can stay connected in a visual way as opposed to, you know, party line. like we
Yeah.
used to do
So I
back
want
then.
to ask this too is, and it's what is, I mean, the proof is in the pudding though. So 30-day, 60-day type of a program, you know, what kind of results do you have? Because you told me beforehand, I said, oh yeah, I'm going to drill down on that. So tell us a little bit about what that is.
So since our inception, we employed a third-party company to monitor our program standards and what happens after they leave. And they do this with us and, you know, hundreds of other rehabs who are willing to pay for this independent study. And without an independent study, it's hard to really say, what are your actual results? We don't know.
Yeah.
We know the industry average is about 12% maybe. So we've been employing them ever since we've been Elevate because we want to track it and make sure we were on the mark with what we were delivering and what we came up with. And last year we received and I have this note, Excellence in Treatment Award, Gold. So that means
Nice.
so they follow the person through the program. Every week they fill out a survey, like how's your depression? How's your anxiety? How's your cravings? They follow them through the whole program and then they follow them for a year after they leave. And so out of all the people that continue to answer these questions and do that, we were rated #1 with success. Like we had the
That's
best.
pretty badass. Out of how many places is that?
Hundreds of people, hundreds of programs have employed.
Hundreds of different programs.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's pretty cool. So what is it about the program that makes it so unique? Because I mean, CrossFit's cool. Mindfulness is cool. You know, 30 and 60 days, but like, I'm missing like, why is it that successful?
I think a big part of what we do that's different, especially in today's times, is we address trauma because we recognize that every person has trauma and 99% of addicts had childhood trauma that put them on this path of addiction. So we recognize the trauma, we address the trauma, we get in there, we get in depth with it, but we don't allow the person to be the victim. Like it's all about full accountability. It's like, yeah, that sucked. Yeah, you didn't deserve that, but let's take responsibility for all the stuff you did after that. And having to take full accountability for their actions of where they're at and not letting the people utilize that victim, because as addicts, we like to use that. It gets us out of trouble. I think it fully puts the ball back in their court where there's total cause over what I'm doing. It's like, and they know the consequences if they fall off or they don't do something right. And I think that's a big part of our successful action is just making people fully accountable for their own
That's
actions.
tough. You know, it's funny. Before we talked, I was talking to a friend of mine and he shared, I won't even say it, but he said that somebody that he knows, something happened to his daughter. I'll put it that way. And it was like, oh God, I mean, it was really, really, really bad. Actually wasn't a recovery. Well, and it was a sad recovery story. Something very, very, very traumatic happened to this lady. And as a result, she ended up ODing. And so, I mean, I wouldn't even say it, but it was bad. I'm wondering how. It's so interesting because I also am a believer A book that I really love is Jocko Willink. He's got Extreme Ownership, the Navy SEALs. And I summarize that book this way, that everything that happens is your fault. Now, I think a little bit kind of, I take that a little bit as a man, or thinking masculinely. Your marriage is messed up, you're this, you're that, it's your fault. Your house got blown over by a hurricane, that's your fault. And so how is that my fault? That's freaking stupid that it was my house got, well, you were the one that chose to live there. So it's not like it's very difficult, particularly in the backdrop of this story that I was told, that nobody could ever say, well, that was, obviously that was this person's fault. But how do you temper the holy shit? Like you hear some really, really bad traumatic, when people are using, I believe everybody is, I think ultimately people are addicted because there's trauma. I think that's probably almost all the time, is my non-therapist opinion. But there's different degrees where, one thing, I didn't get the love and appreciation from my dad. And then there's other shit like my friend Victor Marx, was literally tortured as a child, tortured. So how do you reconcile and bridge that from the empathy that's required, from a hospital, to tend to their wounds, and at the same time to begin to have them rise up to not be this perpetual victim?
It's like we talked about, it's like triaging. It's like, let's address the issue. Yep, that's terrible. Let's heal it up, let's wound it up. Now, what did you do after that? Because of that incident, probably, but what can you be responsible for that occurred after this? And you see so many people who take that pain and turn it into the survivor story or the success story. And that's where we start to employ positive psychology. What's the silver lining? Yeah, that was terrible, but what happened as a result of that? Oh, well, actually, because that happened, I connected with this person and that. And so we start trying to recognize the good things that maybe spawned out of this when it happened, or to start reframing things where it wasn't just all this horrible stuff, but maybe that horrible thing led to a different opportunity, or maybe it's leading you to a better opportunity now. That was your past, it sucked, but here you are now. So what are you going to do to take this and make your future better?
How do they respond to that? I mean, I understand that obviously you've got really good numbers and you've got an independent thing, but what in the immediate, how do they respond to that? Do they get pissed off, or?
Yeah, we go through the whole array of emotions. But like I said, we address the trauma first. We recognize and say, you're right.
I mean, they're like, hell yeah, I did drugs. Didn't you hear what I told you happened to me? Of course, I couldn't fucking handle it any other way, right?
100%. And you recognize that and you acknowledge that, but now here you are. So obviously it wasn't working for you. You're here because that wasn't serving you. So now what can we do going forward where it does? And a lot of what's really different about our program is everybody's completely withdrawn off all drugs and alcohol by the time they leave the detox portion of the program. So they're 100% learning how to deal with emotions and feelings and everything soberly. Sometimes they haven't even seen this person in 30 plus years. They don't even know what me sober looks or feels like. And so it's learning to feel those emotions and being okay with those emotions. It's I'm sad. It's damn right, you're sad. And you should be sad. And that's okay to feel sad. Whereas we have a lot of society saying, no, if you don't feel good, you should take this. And if you feel that pain or this emotion, let's suppress that. We're saying it's okay to feel that. And that's totally natural. Feel it.
So from somebody with your experience, you've been the CEO of a treatment center and services for as long as you have, which is very different than somebody just being a therapist, I think. I mean, this is overall from the business, it's a much higher elevation where you can see all aspects, whether it's the business side, reimbursement, insurance, because these things shape the way that, I think it tends to shape all of addiction services. And then there's new therapies. What do you see in the coming year to 2 to 3 to 4 years, whether that might be, I don't know, legislation maybe, or maybe it is some kick-ass new way of dealing with things, or what is, if you were looking at your crystal ball and kind of give an overall projection from your perspective of this is what I think, or where the industry's going, this is what I think treatment's going to look like. What does that look like in the next year or 2 or 3 years?
It's always changing and it's always getting tricky because like what insurance companies would like to do is give you a pill and send you to outpatient. They don't want to pay for this long-term residential care. They think, just put them on their medication and have them go to a couple meetings, because they're trying to not pay. And so for us, we're
Or
constantly,
to have you die. Let's be real too. Or that you drop dead.
yeah, it's cheaper. It's cheaper that way. So they're always angling for how do we get out of this for the least amount of money? And we're always angling for how do we get them longer term care, because that's what's successful. That's actually going to end up not burdening them in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a constant battle that we're having, unfortunately, with insurance companies, with the different entities that govern and control us. So, we're constantly trying to make the point.
How about therapies? What kind of new stuff are you looking at, or what's the kind of the cool is it CrossFit and kind of the whole philosophy of self-reliance and personal responsibility? That sounds like that's a cornerstone. Is there other cool stuff that you guys do? Like
Sure.
what are you looking at? What's coming down the pipe?
What we're looking at is treating the whole person, body, mind, and soul. So yes, body is part of it. Let's get healthy. Let's get outside. Let's get physical activity. Mind, let's address all the things that from the past, the triggers, the things that we know that are going to send us down that road. Spirituality, and that's individual for everybody. Again, with AA and NA, you kind of had to get on board with Christianity, which is fine. But for those that didn't, there was always this sort of disagreement. So we try to leave that open to whatever your faith is, whatever it is. But there, in my mind, and obviously will help atheists as well, but there should be some sort of spiritual something else going on, or hope for that, or, trying to be in alignment with that sort of thing. And then emotions, just confronting and dealing with emotions, not letting them define us and continuing to move on. I mean, at the end of the day, life is hard. Just because you get sober doesn't mean all of a sudden everything lines up and the rainbows and, all the right things, it just doesn't work that way. Life is still going to continue to be hard. You're still going to be throwing wrenches. You're still going to have to, navigate your way through. You just got to learn how to sort of toughen up and do it sober.
Now, although, yeah, I mean, and like I said, well, in all the interviews we do, I don't really care whether it's 12-step, non-12-step, faith-based, it doesn't matter to me. As long as you're sober and you're living a happy life and you're not delusional, other people around you are, say, oh yeah. But what about abstinence all around? It's funny because one of the things that's come up now in the last couple of issues is, things like Oregon completely legalizing everything. Meth, everything, coke, everything, and there's nothing that's illegal. At least I think. Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe it said it's not a felony or something like that. But for most people, conversation, they're going to say everything's legal. So there's that, and then now there's kind of a movement for people. I see a lot of people talking about. I heard it recently. They call it California sober, and like you switch from like whatever your main thing, your drug of choice was. I was on a interview with somebody else, and they had said that I think it was Demi Lovato had said that she was stopped doing what she was doing, and now she just smoked weed and is drinking a little bit here and there, but she's in recovery. And so there's a big debate about this kind of thing. Like, is that really recovery? Is it not? What are your thoughts on like abstinence or ratcheting it down? At what point do you cross the threshold and all that?
I think that's the big thing is like what might be okay for one person is absolutely not okay for another person. So it may be that someone was a heroin addict, but now they just smoke weed, but they haven't ruined their life and they hold a job and they feel pretty good about that. But then we have this other person where if they just smoke weed, it leads right back to heroin. So there's just like no one size fits all. And I would never want to say it's 100% this way or not. I know another big movement that I've seen lately and people have asked me about is the psychotropic movement. A lot of people are like
microdosing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're finding, peace in that. So it's always changing, but I think it's got to be a personal thing and you've got to know what it is for you.
How do you guys determine that? How do you determine that and evaluate each person individually though? Because, on that kind of note, because it isn't one size fits all. I mean, I know that there's obviously like this is the bread and butter, this is the cornerstone, but then what do you do to make these kind of individualized decisions?
That's where they do the work with their one-on-one counselor. We also have them do like pretty extensive pros and cons. It's like, well, let's list out all the pros of continuing to smoke weed, and let's list out all the cons. And at the end of the day, you know, that con list ends up being quite a bit longer than the pro list. So it's kind of a logical choice. But, you know, for some people, you know, they feel totally fine with smoking weed as long as they're not doing heroin, and that keeps them away from doing heroin. So it's just something, you know, kind of like they say, between them and their preacher, where, you know, it's what's going to be the best for them.
Tell me a little bit about your podcast. What's up with that?
So during the pandemic, realized, you know, how can we reach more people, help more people? It's kind of a funny story. So back in the day when I was doing my original program, things were way looser. We would call it the Wild Wild West back then. The executive director said, "Oh, I got this free airtime on this AM radio. I can't go. You and your fellow client go down there and talk." And we're like, what are we going to talk about? Like, we're barely sober. And he gave us the keys to the car, and we drove down, and we started just, you know, getting on the air and chatting, and we'd have people call in, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I kind of like enjoyed it, and it was fun. And after that, did a show or two, and we actually got some people to start the program. Well, fast forward, that didn't last long. And fast forward 20 something years, I had the idea, like during the pandemic, of this whole reinventing yourself and reinventing everything. And I remembered how much I enjoyed that. And so decided to come up with the Elevate Recovery podcast, where we mostly speak with people from and in recovery, but also people who've just had, you know, overcome massive adversity, because, you know, kind of overcoming addiction is overcoming adversity. And we just have super cool people come on the show, like you, super cool people. And or sometimes we'll just talk amongst ourselves over topics that are really relevant to what's happening right now. Like, you know, should I let my son come home for Christmas? Is that more important than him staying in rehab? So we'll try to address some of those issues that just come up, and try to give as much content to people and get people help in any way they can.
Right on. Cool stuff. Cool, really cool stuff. All right. Well, I guess so. How I start to kind of draft it in on a little bit of a landing. Then, like, how can people get in touch with you? And you know, what else would you want to tell them? I mean, your place sounds cool. The main thing, that CrossFit sounds cool. I love accountability. As I said, I like extreme ownership, and the idea. Although it sounds harsh, everything is your fault. That's my interpretation. It is empowering, because that means that you can change everything too. So you're not just screwed, like, I'm screwed. Well, no, not really. You could do something. Right. And so how do people, besides that stuff that I like a lot, the most important thing that I heard was, hey, we have this independent place that, you know, company that evaluates hundreds and hundreds of places. We came out on top. I think that's pretty important stuff, actually. Obviously, whatever you're doing is working. How do people get in touch with you and learn more and all that?
They should visit our website, elevaterehab.org. There's all the resources there. You can even get to our podcast from that page. We have 24-hour availability. Someone could talk to you, even if you're just not sure what step to do. We'll help with that process as well. And even if we're not the right fit, because we're not always the right fit for everybody, we'll definitely help the person find the right fit, find the resources, whatever we got to do. Like, this is our business, our lives. Like, my admissions counselors have been with me two of them have been with me for over 18 years. Like, and I think this is part of like our success is our executive body. We've all been together for 7+ years, some of us up to 20, 23, 24, 25 years. So we have a massive team. There's not a high turnover. We're here. There's a pillar, you know, we're always creating, and we're here for people no matter what, and in any capacity. And we've got the experience to show it.
Right on. And what about the podcast? Where do they go to the podcast?
Yeah, so that's on Apple Podcasts.
It's on Elevate. It's on elevaterecovery.org. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely there, and also it's on all the other platforms. You know, Apple Podcasts, all that kind of stuff.
And the podcast again is called The Elevate Experience. Is that right?
Yep, you got it.
Right on.
Yeah. And then, yeah, if people can't come to rehab, we have it all, you know, now in an LMS format, which means they can do the whole program virtually. It's not like the best option, but if it's your only option.
How do they do that? How do they do that? Like, I mean, do they get therapy too? How's that work?
Yeah. So there's a curriculum, and they do it online, and then they have groups, and then they have one-on-one counseling, and, you know, they're able to do it all For me personally, I would much rather have the person in person getting the whole experience and away from their life so they can really focus on themselves. But it's an option if there is no other options.
There might not be an option. I always wonder about what happens if you got a couple of kids, or you're a heroin addict, functional, and you got a couple of kids, or you're an alcoholic and you got a family and everybody's depending on, what do you do? You can't just check. It's hard to check out for 30, 60, 90 days. How do you do that? Put everybody on hold.
Yep. And this is how you do it. I mean, you would go do a detox 7 days, 10 days, get sober, and then do the rest outpatient virtually, just like this.
Freaking perfect fit for the COVID world, right?
100%. It worked really well. Yes. Yes.
Right on. Exactly. Well, thanks for taking a minute and jumping on, sharing your story, telling us a little bit about your place. Again, number one, that's badass. And for anybody looking for anything like that, you want to connect with Angie, you're going to go to elevaterehab.org. You can pick up the podcast there, the Elevate Experience, and appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And I just want to make sure our listeners know we're not like all hard, even though it sounds hard. Accountability and CrossFit. There's a lot of bonding, and there's a lot of, kumbayaing with each other.
You scared everybody. You scared everybody.
We still hug. No, there's still a lot of nice stuff that happens, and a lot of bonding that happens with the clients and with the staff. And there's a lot of really positive psychology.
Too late. It's too late. No, I'm just teasing. I know that is the case, because actually, you know what? People wouldn't get into this kind of, they wouldn't go into this. They wouldn't go into this field unless you had a heart for people. Absolutely. And that's really where the bottom line is. No matter how it's a luxury place and you got a private chef and you got this and everything is done for you, or it's more like, no, we work and we do things and it's more perceived to be a little bit harder core. The bottom line at the end of the day is you want to get sober, but nobody goes into it, runs a place at all unless you got a heart for people. So for me, I don't really, it didn't come across that way. I'm just teasing completely, but I think your program sounds awesome.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because you're right. We're not like the high end, make your bed. We actually make people do chores and make their own beds. We're trying to integrate them back to real life, not like, we're just trying to teach you how to be amongst people again. So
totally. I think I'm down with all of it.
Right on.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much. This has been another interview. We got Angie Manson, Elevate Addiction Services and Elevate Experience podcast. And this is a wrap.